Hello, everybody. My name is Jane Welsh. I'm so very honored to welcome you to this session of our IFLA Climate Action webinars on landscape adaptation for climate resilience. I'm a landscape architect and I live and work in Toronto, Canada, where I have had the privilege of leading many innovative and progressive climate actions, such as the Toronto Green Standard, which sets sustainable performance measures for new development, and the Green Roof Bylaw, which resulted in the construction of over 1,400 green roofs in the City of Toronto. The webinar series covers topics of importance to climate action: biodiversity, nature-based water systems, heat, coastal flooding, nature-positive cities, water-sensitive urbanism, focused on the global regions of the Americas, Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. And this session, I'm so delighted to have today because it's focused on the future of landscape architecture, you and all your hard work over your education and as emerging professionals. I've been working on climate adaptation for probably most of my career, which was about 35 to 40 years. And I'm really excited to pass on the baton to this incredible group of young people. So please also stay tuned for further webinars this spring. We have a couple more coming. And remember, landscape architecture is climate action. I'll turn it back over to you, Carly.
Thank you very much, Jane. And also thank you very much, Tamsin, for the early kind of words and beautiful introduction of our community and beyond, and also bringing leadership in developing these webinars. And thank you for setting the frame so clearly. Hello, everyone. So my name is Carlos Bueno. Thank you very much for joining us today, all the way from Europe, Africa, Americas, North, Central, South, and the Caribbean, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. I'm a Colombian architect and landscape researcher and a member of the IFLA Climate Action Group and an associate member of the Society of Landscape Architects. And it's a real privilege to me to moderate the seventh session of our webinar Spring Summer 2026 program series. And also, I would like to send a massive thank you to Daniel Jocelyn, a proud member also of our group, for such an inspiring leadership through network and creative enthusiasm in contributing to this session, bringing together some of our wonderful guests today. And last but not least, thank you to the IFLA communication team, Anushruti and Sally, for all your brilliant support. Just a quick reminder, please keep your mics muted. And please do enthusiastically drop your questions in the chat at any time. We'll bring them. We'll be reading as many as we can into the discussion at the end of the session. Also, please do invite your friends and family. Everyone is welcome. And on the other hand, if you couldn't make it to this session or fancy to rewatch it, do not worry. It will be recorded on our IFLA YouTube channel. So today is really special. Our seventh webinar is the Young Landscape Architects session, Every Day for Future. So seven emerging professionals from 5 countries are going to show us how a generation converts climate anxiety and protests into tangible landscape-led projects and policy. And we're asking 3 main questions through the whole webinar. How do we turn diverse concerns into systemic action? How do young professionals mobilize multicultural networks and safeguard traditional ecological knowledge for climate justice? And what biodiversity strategies can young teams put in place for the well-being of their communities? For this session, our 7 speakers each will be presenting for approximately 8 to 15 minutes. And then it will be followed by a commentary and discussion panel in which we will delve into these questions and more ideas. And so without further ado, I invite Midian, our first speaker, to share her screen, please.
Hi, thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I am Miriam Hernandez Medina. I am from Mexico, and today I'm presenting my thesis titled Entre Futuros, Más allá de las fronteras y las cicatrices en el Río Bravo. And in English, that would be In Between Futures, Beyond Frontiers and Scars in the Rio Bravo. This thesis was advised by Professor of Landscape Architecture Anita Berrizbeitia in Harvard Graduate School of Design in Boston, Massachusetts. And with that, I'll start. So 8 minutes, it's not a lot to speak about a river that has moved for decades and led to a dispute that lasted nearly a century. But I want to start with a simple observation. Rivers move. They flood, they shift course, they carve new paths. That is what rivers do. And for most of the history, the landscapes and communities around them moved with them. But then we decided they shouldn't. We engineered rivers to stay still, we channelized them, we dammed them, fixed them in place. We drew political borders on top of them and called them permanent. And for a while it worked, or it at least seemed to work. But climate change is destabilizing that fiction. The systems we designed to stay still are under pressure they were never built to handle. And nowhere is that more visible than in the US-Mexico border, where a river, a political line, an environmental and social crisis have been converging for decades. This is a project about what happens when the river moves. And with that, I'll move to my next spread. Just to locate the audience, this project is located in the border of the United States and Mexico. We see this square that is locating the river or this stretch of the river and Ciudad Juárez and El Paso, which are the cities I'm working with. And these border cities of El Paso and Juárez are particularly significant in this story because here is where the Rio Bravo ceases to function as a natural border or boundary and is abruptly severed by an imposed parallel 31 degrees, 47 minutes north. And here we can observe one of the sketches appearing on the map. And this sketch is one of 57. And this is a document that was created to mark where the boundary line begins. And I want to take a moment to explain this sketch because this line that we see here, I'm turning on my laser pointer. This is the Rio Bravo, and this is where the parallel line was going to cut the river. So essentially, if we move right, whatever we see on right, that's going to be on the United States. So the river was cut here. And then, of course, like the part that is shared with Mexico, it's at the center point of it is Mexico on one side, and on the other side, that's the United States. If we go back again to this map, I want to explain and take a moment to express that this beautiful map is actually more troubled than what we imagine, because this river has shaped conflict between the two countries. And what we see here is a shifting course of the river from 1852 to 1907, meaning that this movement took around 55 years. And here we see the location of this beautiful map, which is at the border of El Paso and Ciudad Juárez. And on the right, this diagram, I broke it in pieces to explain that very simple. As the river shifted, the United States was gaining territory and they began to sell this land. So of course, this created a dispute in which Mexico was asking for this land back. But before receiving the land back, 300 kilometers of this river were straightened and fundamentally altering the river's ecology. At the bottom, we can see a series of sections illustrating how these levees were designed to protect this newly straightened river from flooding. And if we take a look at the map, what we see in green, that was going to be the land that was going to be granted to the United States, and yellow, that was the land that was going to be returned to Mexico. But again, I want to take a moment to understand this map. We can see here that the river, in fact, was meandering. But what we see today and the river that we live today is very different than this. So I took a moment to do a counter map of this. And I was wondering, so if the channelized river is straightened and with levees, where are those meanders that were cut off? So this is when my word of the hydro ghosts appear, because I went back, I redid this map, and I traced all those lost or the cut-off meanders in the land, and I create this category of ghosts that are completely lost in the presence of the landscape, some that have like some symbolic presence, and those that have like a clear presence in the landscape. All to say that what we see here in Juarez and Del Paso, all the cut-off meanders or the hydroghosts are completely lost in the urban fabric. Here we can see pictures of that map. So that map, the hydroghost, is not metaphoric. It is something that is real, that is inscribed in the land. And this is essentially the where I make my case that this river has changed completely the way we relate with our landscape. And this is how the river looks today on the Mexican side. So what remains today is a heavily surveilled, straightened river, polluted, degraded, and boxed in massive levees, with water controlled by the United States, ripping us away from the river itself. This is the American Dam. And I'll move to my next slide to show you an illustration that I did. But this illustration, I want to explain that this is not the project. This is how the river looks today. And this is a way of expressing what I couldn't otherwise show because I cannot access this place. But the American Dam is here. What we see here, this is the American Dam. And I really want to stress that please take a moment to look at the American Canal, because this is where the water is deviated. This is the Rio Bravo on the Mexican side, and we can observe that, of course, this river is essentially dry. And these are like some other images where you can observe what I'm trying to suggest. So the water is retained here and then deviated to the American Canal, which is adjacent to the Rio Bravo. And with this, I will start explaining very briefly my project, but I went back to this land that is El Chamizal. This is the land that was disputed and returned to Mexico. And what we see here, those are the hydroghosts or the hidrofantasmas that are in the land. And those are coming from the first map that I showed you, the beautiful, colorful map. So I told to myself, I know that the hydroghost or hidrofantasma is here, and I want to begin by bringing that memory to my site and expressing a landscape in movement, un paisaje en movimiento, that reimagines these hydroghosts coming back to the site with this miniaturized observation of the hydroghosts that I mapped before in the contour map that I showed. But then the question is, if we're going to create this new reach of water, how is water going to come here if the river has no water? So it's a very simple operation in which the water will be drawn from an aqueduct that is connected to the American Canal, which has more water and it's at a higher elevation than the river. But at the same time, it becomes a political act in which the users of this site could understand that water, in fact, is coming from co-production. You can see here some images of what I'm trying to say. So again, we can see the American Canal here. We can see how the water is drawn here and pumped, and then creating this water celebration around the site. The aqueduct is also guiding movement in the site. And of course, like it's creating these new meanders where people can live and cross the river and experiment and experience here what it's lost. And I want to end here where I started with the river. The Rio Bravo has always moved. We channelized it, we fixed it in place and turned a living system into infrastructure. And what was left are the hydroghosts, the scars that the river used to be. Entre Futuros responds with a political act, making water visible again, bringing water back to El Chamizal through an aqueduct, through cross-border co-production, through design. It is not just an ecological gesture, but it is a claim that water is shared, that the river is shared, that the communities on both sides of this border are bound together by the same system, and that designing for climate futures means designing across the lines that try to divide them. This is what climate action looks like at the scale of landscape. Water made visible, co-production made real, and a border that begins slowly to move. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for such a thought-provoking presentation. Just a reminder, Miriam Hernandez Medina is a Mexican architect and landscape designer, a recent graduate of Harvard's Graduate School of Design. She trained at UNAM, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, and worked at Tatiana Bilbao's studio, and her thesis earned the GSD Thesis Prize, work that continues as she becomes the 2026 National Olmsted Scholars, North America's highest student honor in our field. She works where power, politics, and ecology collide, treating contested borders and rivers as living system. So thank you so much for sharing those ideas on hydro ghosts, a river held still by the border, water reintroduced as agents of repair. So please hold that idea of water as a connector, and that is going to echo across today. So now we move from contested river to a contested geology from North America to the Philippines. And now for our second speaker, we welcome Ryan Calandria. And while Ryan is sharing his screen, I will tell you a little bit about him. He's an emerging landscape architect from the Philippines, a scholar at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and an advocate through the UP Diliman Youth Advocates for UNESCO and the Circle of Landscape Architecture Students. His undergraduate thesis explores the potentials of geopark development in his own city, work that has carried him across residential, ecological, urban, and watershed design, all driven by a commitment to inclusive and accessible space. His talk developing a geopark in the karst landscape of Antipolo City through integrated nature-based tourism and geoheritage design. So thank you very much, Ryan, and over to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Am I audible?
It's coming through.
Okay. To each and every one of you, I have a question. What is this? It's a rock, right? It may not look much as a single and small piece, but when grouped together, these rocks slowly form our landscapes over thousands of years of geological changes. This is not just a rock. This is a fragment of what we call karst landscapes. Karst are areas of land or type of topography typically made of limestone. Through this geological process, results of unusual surfaces and features such as sinkholes, caves, and rock formations to which these landscapes have been identified increasingly as tourist spots. In my country, the Philippines is gifted with karst landscapes due to its combination of geological features and climate. As more of these landscapes are being discovered and explored along with the advancement of the tourism industry, they also face degradation from different factors, including overexploitation, land conversion, and rapid urbanization that can worsen the associated hazards. With decades of overexploitation of our natural resources, the question now, what is the solution? To everyone, I present my thesis titled Developing Geopark in Selected Karst Landscapes in Antipolo City through an integrated nature-based tourism and geological heritage design with my advisor, Professor Jose Dan Villajuan. You may ask this question right away. What is a geopark? According to UNESCO, the goal is to rediscover and reconnect society to how the land has shaped every aspect of human lives. As they incorporate the natural, cultural, and intangible heritage, it aims to inform on key issues of society that enhances awareness and understands sustainable resource management, climate change, and mitigating natural hazard-related risk. In Antipolo City, being rich in tourist spots with natural features, it is now embarked on numerous challenges as it is being urbanized, expanding from the metropolitan area, including land conversion, demand for residential spaces, and climate-induced disasters aggravated by human activities that led to degradation of environmental resources. Within the city, I have discovered an area with the potential to highlight its geological features and uncover its story. With the background, we now identify the main problem. How can this area be redeveloped? To which the goal is to create a landscape design of the geopark development. To understand the existing spaces, different elements were identified and analyzed, such as distinguishing the geological interest, site inventory, including the soil, the land cover, the contours or the topography, the existing circulation, site images from days of visiting the site and supplemented by images from drone mapping, geology of the site through secondary data, which revealed that the area has a formation dating back to approximately 12 to 16 million years ago. Interview with representatives of the community and analysis of selected case studies of geoparks. With this analyzed data, the design translates to the proposed spaces, emphasizing what geopark composes. Primarily, an avenue to promote geoheritage and geoconservation through nature-based interventions and tourism. Such spaces include the Geopark Center, Community Center, and divided areas of the quarry site featuring the entrance and the nature area. Existing areas such as the Mystical Cave still features one of the geological components and key area of the development. With this, I present what I call this design, the Puting Bato Geopark, or in English, the White Rock Geopark. Let's start with the first spot, the Geopark Center, as it highlights one of the components of a geopark, particularly an information center. It also showcases the culture of the communities rooted in its agricultural background. As users venture further in the geopark, the next destination is the proposed community center. This area uplifts the community spirit as it provides a middle ground among different communities and an avenue to showcase their local crafts and culture. One of the major developments in the geopark is the quarry area, or the entrance, given its exposed soil or bedrock layer. Exploring further in the former quarry site, the next part is the quarry nature area, emphasizing the intervention of forest restoration as most areas are reforested. One of the key areas is the Mystical Cave, which also features a long walk before users reach the entrance of the underground cave and the hiking trail beyond the cave. With all those presented, how does this geopark design highlight nature-based solutions? The geopark incorporates geology, culture, education, and sustainable development to demonstrate how working with natural systems addresses environmental, social, and economic challenges. First, sustainable land management, in which geopark encourages farming, forestry, and tourism practices that protect soil, conserve natural elements, and maintain ecosystem while supporting local livelihoods. Second, environmental education through visitor centers, guided tours, and interpretive trails or geotrails. Geoparks raise awareness of how natural system provides essential services and why protecting them benefits the communities. Third, geotourism. Tourism is designed to minimize environmental impacts while generating income that supports conservation, local businesses, and cultural heritage. Lastly, the planting plan showcases site-specific landscape interventions. The selection of subscapes in this design is primarily dependent on the context of the site, focusing on quarry reforestation and characterized by slope stability and erosion resistant of some trees and shrubs. Next, integrating the long-term knowledge, practices, and beliefs of local communities into the conservation and management of its landscapes. TEK is based on generations of observation and interaction with the environment, making it a valuable complement to this research. I was able to interview several representatives of the communities in the area in which there are traditional practices such as agricultural activities that have shaped the livelihood of the community. But the quarry has stopped this culture, which I considered bringing back in the proposed design. Next, conservation of natural and geological heritage in which local communities contribute knowledge about the plants, the wildlife, rocks, and other landscape components. Cultural heritage preservation, especially geopark, documents and shares local stories and legends connected to the rocks, the mountains, and the cave. Education and interpretation, the guided tours, the museums, the centers, the programs include traditional knowledge alongside scientific explanation. Visitors gain a broader understanding of how people have interacted with the landscape over time. Overall, a geopark demonstrates that protecting geoheritage and surrounding ecosystem can provide practical solutions to challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, water management, and natural hazards, while forests fostering sustainable economic development and community well-being. By combining the knowledge from the communities with scientific research, it aims to protect its heritage while supporting local cultures, sustainable livelihoods, and environmental stewardship. As I end this presentation, to everyone here right now, as we consider the future of our landscapes, remember, rocks matter. Its features, its impact, its story. That is it for my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for sharing this idea. A quarry, a cave, and a rock formation mountain reframe the shared geological heritage. So with nature-based solutions doing the work of protection and livelihood, which is great. So notice the move here. So it is heritage as active strategy. So really thank you for those ideas, Ryan. So, okay, guys, keep up with that. And then because our next speaker makes exactly that case. So our third speaker is Lucas Rey Carlo Dresner, a landscape architecture student at Hochschule University in Germany and a freelance planting designer working on resilient vegetation strategies. He's deeply networked across the young professions, BU-FALA, ELASA, BDLA, and IFLA students, and a junior representative of BDLA Hessen, championing nature-based solutions and cross-cultural knowledge exchange. He's presenting Cooling Batten Alawi, a reviving traditional courtyard system for climate resilience in Riyadh, work developed at the ISOCARP Young Planning Professionals workshop with his co-authors, Abdullah Al-Raheh, Nada Al-Mula, Mohamed Al-Saud, Stephanie Jimenez, and Hannah Liam. Lucas, welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. So, my theme of today is Cooling Batten Al-Hawis, Reviving Traditional Courtyard Systems for Climate Resilience in Riyadh. I know Carlos already introduced me, just a quick overview what I did and why I'm here today. I'm currently working at Dres und Sommer, and I'm a freelance garden and plant designer in Germany. And these are some of my projects. And in December and November, I had the opportunity to go for 2 weeks to Riyadh with the ISOCARP World Planning Congress and the Young Planning Professional Workshop, which was hosted by ISOCARP and also the municipality of Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. Just a quick picture how it was. It was a great time there. I had a fantastic team, which I will introduce later in this talk. And for everybody who's not familiar with Saudi Arabia, we're in the Middle East. This is part of Saudi Arabia, and this is the whole province of Riyadh. Riyadh is the main province of Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh is also the capital of Saudi Arabia. And we're focusing on Al Dirah, which is the heart of Saudi Arabia, where it was founded and fought for. And as you can see, we've been there at 10 a.m. in the morning, and nobody was there because is around 30 to 40 degrees, even in winter, and it reaches up to 50 degrees in summer sometimes. But we visited again, and the change was like night and day, because people use it only in the nighttime. I did a little collage of the main attractions there. As you can see in the background, there's a castle or fortress, which is Muqarrab, the founding place or fort place of Saudi Arabia. And what we thought about, how can we design the place and the whole district so people can use it even in daytime when it's still as hot as it is. So we did a little analyzation of the heat part. Let me just check. No, I don't know. Where the heat part is, where cooling is coming from, which ways people walk through, which are the main corridors, the main streets, where are public transportation as buses and metro stations, and where are urban spaces and mosque spaces for people to use. Then we focused on different user usage. So child-friendly places. As you can see, there's a whole street colored pink because that's the toy selling street where every child loves to go in Saudi Arabia and buys their toys there. Then we have open spaces for women, which are mosques, shopping centers, markets, and also the streets that are open for women and are safe for women to use. Then we have adult social interaction places, which mean families and also men use spaces, which are all of the public spaces, the mosque, the markets, the city centers. And then we have destinations for elderly who can walk there or which are mostly occupied. Or again, markets, open spaces, and mosque. The district is very divided into northern part, which is more for communal living area, and then the main area, the city center, and then to the south, there's more marketplace area. And the idea was to have a walk through it and design a green and adaptable walk through the city, which you can see here. You have the city center with the fortress, then you have the Batn al-Hawis, the traditional perimeter block development in Islamic architecture, and then you have the metro stations, which should be accessible for everybody by foot. Now, what's in Batn al-Hawi? As I mentioned, it's the perimetric block development in classic Islamic architecture. Mostly it's family housing units, but also markets, and it's made mostly of local sustainable materials, which include straws, clay, and sandstone. There's a terminal comfort because there are small windows on top of the construction, and we're in existing infrastructure. So they're already built and used. This is actually a picture of one of the Batn al-Hawis we visited, and most of them are not used today as they can be used. So what we thought about is have the foundation for cool Riyadh. So we want to enhance comfortability. We want to have mixed use of housing and livelihood. We want to have more than only plant design, but also playgrounds, seating areas, semi-public spaces, and new destinations and alternative routes for children, women, elderly people, which are currently not using the space as they can. And we have two scales of Batn al-Hawis. One is small, where only one person or one family is using the whole courtyard, which are privately owned then. And then we have medium to larger scales Buttnell Howies, which are used by multiple families and also shop owners, which we come back later to. As I mentioned, we not only mentioned pocket parks, but also seeding areas, playgrounds, urban farming initiatives. And the two scales for Buttnell Howies are important for the greywater usage. As you all know, Saudi Arabia is an arid country. There is a lot of drought in the summer, and most of the water is brought in from the sea. And we thought about how can we use the greywater for planting design. So the smaller the Buttnell Howie, the drier or more arid is the planting design. The bigger the Buttnell Howie, the wetter and the more colorful and semi-arid the planting is. This could be possible planting schemes from arid to semi-arid and step planting designs used in Europe and America already. This is part of my bachelor thesis, which is currently a work in progress, so I can only show you this so far. But in the end, the idea is that every courtyard should be green, be adaptable, and be a place where people can walk through and sit there. So we have an open space for everybody that can walk there. As I mentioned, I was there 2 weeks. 1 week was with my incredible team, Nada Al-Mullah, Mohammed Al-Saud, Stephanie Jimenez, Abdullah Al-Pash, and Hannah Lim. And I just want to give a quick thank you again for my team. And this was my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and also for representing the whole team on your work in progress. Great ideas on passive cooling, grey water fed planting laboratories, historic alleys turned into climate refuges. So to see traditional ecological knowledge with also pocket parks and culture as working climate technology. And so now we travel to the Alps, where two projects read the same fragile valley through two complementary lenses. First, the ground itself. So our next two speakers are both master's scholars in landscape architecture at ETH Zurich from the chair of Professor Martina Bosser. So first we have Melissa Delgado, who is a Mexican architect with 6 years of international experience, trained at also UNAM, whose research bridges urban planning, climate resilience, and geomorphological risk mitigation. Joining her, we have also Varinia Prada, a Peruvian architect and researcher, Pronavec, Bicentennial Generation Fellow, co-founder of Lima Húmeda on urban water cycles, and a former public infrastructure lead for the Peruvian government. So together, they're presenting their project Becoming Sediment. Melissa and Varinia, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, Carlos. Good evening, everyone. Well, for us, good evening. For you, good morning. This is Varinia and Melissa, and we're very excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation to this webinar. Well, this project was developed in the second foundation studio of the Masters of Science Landscape Architecture in the program of ETH Zurich under the guidance of Bosser Chair, led by Martina Bosser. Our work centers on the Lotschental Valley in Switzerland, which is a territory defined by dynamic high alpine forces.
Historically, this has been a landscape of constant seasonal transformations. However, recent climate events have fundamentally altered its geomorphology, shifting our relationship with the territory from one of peaceful coexistence to one of acute environmental risk. Before diving into our design proposal, we want to walk through with you to the precise event that transformed this valley.
Yeah, so to understand the scale of these dynamics, we must look at the specific geography of the site. Located within the Valais cluster in the southwestern Switzerland of the Luchental, this is a high alpine valley carved by deep glacial history. Due to its very steep topography and climatic positioning, it has historically been a highly responsive system. Today, accelerated global warming is deeply affecting the high altitude permafrost, which is destabilizing rock formations that have been frozen for thousands of years and turning these majestic alpine slopes into highly volatile zones. So what happens when the stability breaks is what we see here. On May 28 last year, a massive chunk of the Birch Glacier broke off in just 40 seconds. A violent, devastating avalanche of approximately 9 million cubic meters of ice, mud, and rock rushed down the slope, moving at that catastrophic speed and volume. The debris behaved like a liquid mass, completely reshaping the geography of the valley floor in less than a minute. It's quite impressive. So the aftermath was quite shocking, actually. Nearly 90% of the village of Platen disappeared under like this vast plain of mud and solid debris, completely disrupting, of course, the daily life and the ecological networks as well. While this single event is catastrophic, it is crucial to understand that it represents only a fraction of the total ice melt and permafrost degradation happening across Switzerland. This sudden transformation forced us to rethink our role here. We cannot simply fight the sediment or expect the landscape to remain static. We must learn to design with it, which is where our project begins. Following this event, and this is our point of departure. In this animation, we see how time and water have carved a deep trench and how these massive boulders have come together almost by chance, but they create like an entirely new spatial condition. So our team's approach begins here by understanding that water transports bits of mountains that can actually be rearranged to heal the landscape. So to build this new infrastructure, we first had to listen closely to the site's quietest moments. In winter, the logic of the terrain is further revealed. These white mounds hidden under the snow could be massive boulders, but they could also function as microhabitats. In the top middle photograph, we observe how these trees struggle to remain vertical despite the shifting ground beneath them. The snow covers the trauma, but it exposes the underlying physical structures of the valley as well. So as the snow melts, the landslide reveals itself as a surgical cut, exposing the hidden intimate relationship between the soil and life. These exposed soil layers remind us that the landscape is a living vertical archive. Life here returns in stages. So as we see on the bottom left, moss and cushion plants act as the true pioneers. This first stage of ecological succession shows us that the mountain is already trying to heal itself. Our intervention is here just to facilitate that process. At the same time, this cut unleashes chemical dynamics, which the avalanche minerals embedded in the deep rock are now exposed to the atmosphere, reacting with oxidation and creating these vivid orange iron flows that move through the debris cone slopes. So to ground our intuition, this interpretive map allows us to visualize the specific direction and the massive volume of the debris. This drawing is like an abstraction meant to convey the sheer scale and the vector behavior of the displaced ground. The ochre colors, like these little arrows, follow the path of the landscape's internal minerals as they were dragged down the slopes, illustrating how the debris cone expanded across the valley floor. By mapping these arrows, we capture the new dimensions of the cone as a directional continuous movement of matter that has completely realigned the waterways and the topography of Blatten. To understand why the sediment behaves the way it does, we must look below the surface at this section. The avalanche did not just move the mass, it exposed deep geological strata that has been sealed for thousands of years. The upper ecological layers of these mountains consist of granitic rocks, which is very heavy in minerals such as pyrite, which are represented here in the dark gray hatches. So once the landslide dragged these rocks down, this embedded pyrite was suddenly exposed to the atmospheric conditions, which is oxygen and water, triggering a rapid process of oxidization. As these mineral sediments are carried into the Lonza riverbed, the Lonza is this river of the valley, they dissolved and alter the water chemistry through iron mineralization. This chemical shift directly impacts the lower valley, altering the water systems and that support the traditional agricultural activities of the Lochendor. So this intersection of the deep geology, chemistry, and rural life is what defines the metabolism of our site. So to address this massive geological movement, we turned away from rigid concrete solutions and instead looked back at traditional alpine methods of erosion control. We studied vernacular intelligence of traditional woven wattles, interlaced with timber structures that have been historically used across the mountain slope to catch the traveling soil. We decided to test here in this model this traditional knowledge seen in the video. So with the sediment movement in mind, we analyze how these flexible woven barriers can catch falling rocks and find sediment to build productive terraces over time. So here we can observe, maybe again, the fluid dynamics at play, how the water is intentionally deviated towards the reinforced edges of the terraces, creating a safe lateral canal that is gently conducted down the slope by controlled water steps. So this ancient craft of weaving wood becomes our primary tool for soil stabilization. To verify our physical test, we translated the model into a digital 3D scan. As a result, we can clearly observe that these barriers successfully allocate sediment deposition on the red marked areas while isolating control erosion specifically along the blue shaded edges of the woven structures. This balance confirmed that the layout could perform as intended. So by superposing our project lines directly onto our interpretative flow analysis, our design intervention emerges naturally from the active forces of the valley floor. After this throughout site analysis and our physical experimental process, we placed our structural barriers in the areas that are more likely to receive massive sediment deposition, allowing us to actively stabilize the debris cone. So instead of fighting the gravity of the landslide, these new terraced lines across the paths of movement, they're placed at precise angles. So they act somehow as a responsive topography, slowing down the material velocity and catching the mountain's displacement to build new consolidated ground where the landscape needs it most. Okay, so to materialize these strategic lines, our construction logic directly follows the natural stages of ecological succession. We begin by implementing the wattle revetment using local silex or larix. This initial pioneer stage is light and flexible, and it's designed specifically to catch the first falling rocks and find sediment as the ground begins to settle. So as the mountain provides the material over time, we begin to sort and organize the larger rocks that accumulate behind the wicker. This marks a process of active on-site mining where we leverage the debris itself to build more permanent gravity-based structures that reinforce the initial intervention. This fence is eventually reinforced by a dry stone wall where the pioneer species begin to colonize the crevices, starting the thermal process we saw in the pictures at the beginning. As these pioneer plants are naturally buried by further sediment, they become part of the biomass and they enrich the topsoil, turning mineral debris into fertile ground. Then we integrate a living barrier, that's how we're calling it, by planting Salix betulus or alnus near the wall. The roots act as a biological anchor, so the infrastructure becomes a hybrid of stone, wood, and living tissue. Finally, once the terrace is fully established, we introduce a permeable irrigation channel. This system functions similarly to the traditional suonen of the ballet, optimizing water retention and infiltration. So by managing the water flow this way, we create a high altitude meadow that restores biological agency and provides productive grazing land for local sheep and cows.
So moving from the principal drawings that Marina just presented, we go now to the territorial scale. This master plan animation reveals our project growth over time. Our proposal begins fundamentally with a path along the Lonza River. In this animated sequence, you can observe how we actively stitch or sew all the damaged landscape back together. True to our construction logic, we start from the lowest point near the Lonza riverbed, and then we start building upwards into the slope. Each progressive line appearing on the screen represents a terrace that catches sediment, gradually transforming an open environment scar into a structured, highly productive surface. This entire temporal intervention stands as a direct response to the deep morphology of the site, working in synergy with the natural debris cones and the sediment transport capacity of the water. Patty? In this comprehensive section of the valley, we lay out the complete sequence of the avalanche mitigation terraces that protect the agroecological terraces on the north slope, followed by the retention dikes that contain the riparian buffer on the Lonza. We are basically moving from the left of your screen towards the right. So on the southern slope, after the riparian buffer, we find the sediment retention wetland, followed by the pasture or meadow terraces stitched together by a mineral trail. This mineral trail is an educational part that shows us the geological strata and allows us to experience the memory and transformation of the mountain. So now this is our general section, and we're going to go one by one to each one of these strategies. As a first stage, these avalanche mitigation terraces are allocated to protect the new road, the agroecological terraces, and the village. These barriers facilitate the primary ecological succession of the alpine vegetation, such as Larix decidua, which root system help to stabilize this structure. Patty? The productive garden sustained by vernacular irrigation logic is a source for community food production sustained by microclimatic regulation. This is all about our agroecological terraces. That if we continue to the next slide, we can see that the productive garden has as a structure the crib wall dike that can show us how the walls are stabilized also by the Salix family trees, while creating a transition between the river and the ecosystem that shelter also different kinds of wildlife. Patty? Focusing on building with time, this profile highlights the initial state intervention. By building this dike along the Lonza, we get our first gains through the path that serves as a connection of Blatten with the rest of the Lot Chantal. After the avalanche, we kind of lost the connection between both towns that we have on sites from Blatten. So one of the first gains is to recover this path that could connect it on the base part of the valley. This crib wall dike works as a line of protection before the debris cone mineralized water reaches the Lonza. This sediment retention wetland first goes through a series of low energy decantation ponds that help to heavy metal and iron settle on the bottom. This material can later on be used as a resource for construction material pigmentation. As a second step of the process, the check dams have biochemical filters made of limestone gravel substrates and microphyte root zones. Both filters neutralize the water pH and biological process alpine water runoff. So by creating this path, we also generate this wall that can stop from going into the Lonza contaminated with all these minerals that are exposed from the mountain that previously Varinia explained, and they go through all this process of ponds, filtration ponds. Along this path construction to communicate all these projects and the whole valley, we created this mineral path planned as a productive terrace and as a maintenance route for the productive terraces. Also exposes the different layers through time of the soil and debris accumulated, and it creates a geological lecture on the site that reminds us also of the memory of this place. Buddy? The following part of the system is composed by these debris woven barriers covered by the dry stone wall. Here we are on the south slope of the valley, where we don't have as much sunlight as on the north slope. Terraces are designed to catch the debris and create terraces one at a time through the natural process of erosion. Because of the southern slope shaded condition, we propose traditional low-intensity grazing terraces where the meadow composed by perennial root systems and hay is highly maintained by cattle and sustains the local pasture heritage. At the very top part of our system, and basically the last part of the whole system, we have these overflow terraces, which act as an ecological safety valve for extreme seasonal water surges. On one hand, it works as a basin to evenly distribute the water through all these terraces that we have created previously, and also when the snow melt has decreased. On the other hand, it also works as a temporary aquatic habitat during the peak flooding. Here we can see a visualization of those water overflow terraces. On one hand, it works as a basin, as I explained before, and yeah, basically that. So with all the previous steps that we mentioned before, all these crib walls that generated the paths, these mineral paths, the terraces that work for productive agricultural purposes, and the kettle ones, we have the water moving through. Can you play? I think that is a video, buddy. We have how this water goes from all these basins that we have on the top of the system. They flow through the terraces and they go through all these ponds of infiltration that we've created. And then they go into the Lonza system. Buddy?
Yeah, it's just a bit heavy and it takes a while. Yeah.
Having a closer look to this intersection, like this zoom in plan of this particular area where we can see the production terraces, we can see the Lonza, we can see our main path, the kettle terraces, and also the sedimentation ponds. We can see how the scale varies from each one of these areas and how the maintenance also changes from each one of them. Everybody? Yeah, just super quick in the last part. Yeah, we have all these different maintenance regimes that tell us where we would require more people to put effort in long term to maintain all of these structures, which would be maybe the terraces. Some of them are more easy and require less budget too. And finally, we close this with this visual perspective, looking down from the terraces towards the village of Latin and its fields. And we hope that with time, Blatten can take the debris cone as an opportunity to reclaim a vernacular logic and a land management that has defined the valley landscape for generations. By observing to where the sediment wants to go and using the forces of the site, we aim to start a process where the mountain recovers the ability to hold itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Varinia, for showing us other contexts, especially in winter, which is quite different. So let's just recapitulate some of your ideas on sediment trapping terraces, discovery of different strata, and wetlands that don't fight the mountain, but actually work with where it already wants to flow. So,
Yeah.
So the valley can sustain like itself, right? So thank you very much for those ideas and thought-provoking presentation. So our final project picks up the slope after the collapse and asks what grows back and who lives from it. So our closing presentations, two more ETH Zurich Master Scholars from Professor Boser Chair. First, we have Sam Choi. He is an architect, a Cooper Union graduate who practices in Seoul, exploring the threshold between architecture and landscape through hand-drawn and digital representation, and teaching assistant at the Boser Chair. And together with Mila Alman, who is an architect and illustrator based between Zurich and Beijing, a Cambridge graduate who uses drawing as a research tool to narrate identity and change in resilient landscapes. Their project is titled Shifting Grounds. So Sam and Mila, welcome, and please take it away.
Hello, thank you for hosting us today. It's amazing already to see all of the projects that has been already shared. And thank you, Varinia and Mel, also for presenting before us and already grounding us to the site of Blatten. Perhaps you will have to stay with us for another few minutes in Blatten and in Switzerland in the Alps, where we explore new ways of looking at this dynamic landscape, as we're part of the same chair of Studio Vosa at ETH. So my name is Mila, and with me is Sam, who will present another project that works with shifting grounds. So as we walked up the vertical gradients of a landscape that was continuously shaped by landslides and glacier dynamics, we see that these layering of materials coming down and growing is directly used in the traditional infrastructures, from the debris cones, scree, and forests to the timber and stone used to build the settlements. Such destructive events doesn't happen one time, but is something that was always part of the lived landscape and seasonal cycles of this region. And we begin to imagine how we would live with it in the future. In the next image, we would see the collapsed forest that was on the path on which the Birch Glacier came down, as you also saw in the video in Varinia and Melissa's presentation earlier. And you can begin to understand the kind of sheer scale of this sort of land movement. And now let's continue.
Now let's continue by asking ourselves a question. What does it mean for a landscape to recover after a collapse? In Blatten, recovery is not understood as returning the valley to a former static condition. The ground continues to move, water continues to reshape the terrain, and seasons continuously transform patterns of life across the slopes. Our project responds to this landscape not through resistance, but through coexistence with these ongoing dynamics. Across the site, different zones emerge in response to different conditions. Moving soft mound landscapes and agricultural fields within the southern debris cone, reforestation zones along the steeper upper slopes, hard terrace agriculture and settlement zones on the northern slope, and public spaces such as the marketplace and the bakery yard, trails and river edges that reconnect these systems together. Recovery therefore becomes a living and interconnected process where tourism, agriculture, ecology maintenance, animal movement, and communal life continuously support one another over time. The landscape is not simply repaired, but gradually lived back into existence through ongoing interaction between people, climate, water, and terrain. Now, when we look at the topography and start analyzing, we begin to understand the site as having two very different slope conditions. The southern slope is broader and more accumulative. This is where the landslide debris settles and slowly shifts over time. While the northern slope is much steeper, harsher, and more exposed, these two conditions require two distinct responses. On the shallower southern side, A series of soft dams work with the dynamics of the landslide rather than against it. This movable and manageable landscape system slows water flow, retains sediment, and gradually supports soil formation and vegetation growth. As the southern slope becomes steeper at higher elevations, reforestation strategies are introduced to further stabilize the moving ground through ecological succession. On the steeper, more exposed northern side, a series of hard stone terraces create stable platforms for settlement and intensive agriculture. Integrated with historic zone and irrigation systems, these terraces support productive planting and long-term occupation within the alpine landscape.
Before we move further with the project, let's make a short segue into the historic system of the region that has been mentioned previously. In a region that was historically prone to landslide, soil erosion, and drought with a low underground water table, the resulting agricultural system that was developed on thin soil and is dependent on snowmelt and glaciers. These traditional practices of managing water with sonens, an irrigation system that takes water from glacier streams directly from the source and distribute it horizontally along the valley. It would be translated to bring value in addition to its tourism income today. To cope with erosion, the local farmers had built thin retention partitions between the fields, these kind of little mud walls, and these would be regularly maintained, and they would redistribute soil across the slopes. These practices are based on a flexible and mobile understanding of infrastructure in an unstable landscape, and develop stable system of maintenance and collective action. Within the existing traditional system of alpine grazing that circulate between the altitude belts, we weave in our own system using plants for soil building. We progressively build up soil biomass and stability with the roots and succession of pioneer scree communities, dry pollinator meadows, pioneer fruiting shrubs, and protection forest species. We combine these in a cumulative way where the first generation of plants can already start to be used for grazing and honeymaking after the first 2-3 years of establishment and accumulate from that. The pioneer species selected favor sun exposure, and on top of being drought and frost tolerant, these plants are answering to a conflicting condition of the quite clayish and rocky deposits of the landslide, which holds water, but at the same time is exposed to increasing and long drought periods expected in this valley. Our structures then answer to different conditions on two sides coming down to the Lonza River. On the south side, we stop erosion with a porous system in the soft dams, letting water through, trapping soil, slowing down water, like an upscaled version of the traditional sloped field partition. Whereas the terrace side plugs into the existing sonens, distributing water from the glacier stream and reservoir into the irrigation system. And on the river retention on both sides, they guide the meander of the river that was interrupted by the landslide.
From water, let's now move on to the practice of maintenance. All hard terraces on the northern slopes are connected through paths for farming and maintenance, while only 3 horizontal path bands are open to tourists in order to protect settlement and agricultural areas. The new cantonal road also cuts through the meadows and terrace systems, becoming another major layer of movement across the site. Along the river edges, the infrastructure both contains Lonza and collects debris using overflow events, while also serving as one of the primary routes for maintenance vehicles. On the southern slope, the path system begins at the most stable area of the debris cone, where the parking lot and the marketplace are located. From here, the soft dams extend into the shifting landscape. Because the terrain is constantly moving, these paths are closely tied to active maintenance and landscape management, while also connecting directly to the main summer hiking trail through the valley. With this section, we can further understand how maintenance in the soft dams is carried out in a cyclical nature with the help of the river retention infrastructure. The river retention edge acts primarily as debris collector, gathering material carried down from the unstable slopes. Rather than treating this debris as waste, the project works with it as part of a continuous cycle. So the debris falls, they're collected, redistributed back onto unstable areas, and continuously maintained over time. As this process repeats, the soft dams slowly accumulate moisture, sediment, and organic matter, allowing vegetation to gradually establish itself within the moving terrain. In this atmospheric drawing of the soft dam, we can see how organic matter gradually builds up within the retained debris landscape. Along the paths bands of rye are planted as part of the productive agricultural system, reconnecting the site to the historic tradition of the village baking house and local bread making practices.
And aside from the cultivated strips, the soft dams also act as a threshold habitat for scree colonizers and smaller animals such as lizards and pollinators that are also very important to recovering the landscape, as they react to the different materials that comes down. And at the bottom of these systems, the river edge retention was planned to not hold all the force, but selectively let go in some areas, with shifting maintenance paths and tourist hiking trails crossing over, from which you can walk along the Lanza and see the landscapes of the debris spilling over through time.
To further study the relationship of water and the moving debris within the soft mounds, a material study was carried out. What becomes visible in this study is that the water does not move in a single direction or condition. Part of the flow passes directly through and beneath the soft dams, while another part moves laterally along the edge of the dams at the same time. These parallel movements begin to demonstrate how the soft dams operate less as rigid barriers and more as porous landscape systems that slow, redirect, and redistribute water and sediment across the terrain.
And if we look at this from a further scale, we observe from our model that tiny debris triangles will be formed from the accumulated sediments as the water sips under the structure. These swell triangles accumulate on top of each other like a smaller cousin of the large debris cones that you can see in the Loschenthal Valley. And we start to imagine a mosaic of plant communities growing into these patterns. Higher pressure points would also break through the structure where the residents can then decide to build from it, or also let it break down as a biodiverse swell bed, as we've seen in the previous sketches. Stepping back to the overall scale, we planned our vegetation strategy with 4 modules. I'll wait for a moment for the drawing. Where the sun and shade side of the valley heavily affects the flowering time and exposure, thus the grazing and pollinator cycles that comes in play in our production. So in the plan, we see the grazing and pollinator meadow, the intercropped rye edge with peas and nitrogen fixers that would help them grow, meadow intercropped with pioneer fruiting shrubs and protection forests in the higher areas. All species are drought tolerant and build on each other, developing a resilient system. And then all of these layers can be culminated into foods and diversify income in the region. The alpine bees and native valley grazing sheep and goats circulate up in altitude, from which we make dairy product, wool, and honey. The rye is used for the traditional valley rye bread, producing enough for a small artisanal bakery. The pioneer shrubs, such as Juniperus communis and Hippophae rhamnoides, produce fruits high in nutrients that can be processed into various products. As these are also currently studied in the canton of the Valais to assess their economic value for the region. These are also accessible to visitors during food markets and tasting house hosted in the soft dams protected area. And in this drawing, we also see all of these different species coming in play in the life of Blatten. And in the terraces, we bring together the retaining stone wall, the irrigation, and the footpaths in one line. Organic matter builds up between them, where the fruiting pioneer shrubs would be then intercropped with the companion meadow and further stabilizes the swell with their roots.
Beehives are placed along the sunny terraces of the northern slope, but at the same time within the soft dam landscapes, supporting pollination and honey production. Following seasonal flowering cycles, the hives gradually move upward in elevation throughout spring and summer, from the valley slopes to alpine meadows and herb fields and forest borders, before returning downslope during winter dormancy. In this way, the movement of bees become closely tied to the seasonal and ecological rhythms of the landscape. We will now close our presentation by looking at the bigger picture in a form of a timeline that presents different phases of implementation and progression of the project. The first phase begins with implementation of the initial soft dam and its adjacent river retention infrastructure on the southern debris cone. Here, the parking lot and marketplace establish one of the first stable public nodes within the recovering landscape, while reforestation begins along the lower areas and the upper southern slope to aid long-term stabilization. On the opposite northern slope, the first hard terraces establish the initial settlement zone, together with the bakery yard and its adjacent river retention wall. From this point, agricultural terraces gradually extend further across the slope over time. As the project progresses, the soft dam system slowly move upward alongside the shifting debris landscape, while the hard terraces continue extending laterally across the northern slope. This timeline shows how tourism, agriculture, animal movement, and maintenance are all interconnected through seasonal and altitudinal change. As temperatures shift throughout the year, activities migrate across the landscape. Sheep move between grazing areas at different elevations, while beehives gradually move upward following flowering cycles from the valley slopes to alpine meadows. Tourism also follows these seasonal rhythms within the hiking and agricultural activity, peaking during summer months while winter becomes largely dormant.
In fact, the maintenance periods answer to the spring snowmelt and rockfall at a year scale, and an 8-year cycle for large refurbishments answering to large destructive events and weathering. Overall, the project progresses with the increasing drought stress that the region faces, global warming leading to the decrease of glacier stream feeding the irrigation system, and precipitation extremes leading to erosion and flash floods of the Lonza River. To end, our projects tested how to initiate a cumulative process that stems from the historic culture of climate and geologic mobility in the region, using temporal and biodiverse agriculture structures that would be lived with and functions with an unstable landscape instead of trying to build permanence. Thank you for staying with us so long in Blatten and in the Alps. And perhaps I think Carlos would open up questions after this.
Yes. So thank you very much, Sam and Mila, for sharing your ideas on pioneering species and adaptive topography established in the post landslide slope, while re-alpine, the cheese, and honey and berries. Yeah, make the recovery something the community can live from. Beautiful, beautiful notes to bring us to conversation. So I think we have questions now. And over to you, Jane.
Sure, I'm happy to. We have a question from a student, which is a great question. How can we, as a new generation of landscape professionals, move beyond climate anxiety and become effective actors in implementing nature-based landscape scale solutions that influence public policy, protect biodiversity, and improve community well-being, particularly in developing countries where financial and institutional support is often limited? So that is a great question. So I turn it over to the presenters to respond. Do you have a response there?
Is it okay to start? Sorry. Okay. Maybe
Sorry.
it's by order. Is it by
Let's see.
order? I'm not
Is it by
sure.
order yet, or just open?
Go ahead, Varinia.
Quite open.
Oh, well,
Go ahead.
okay. Well, I just wanted to say that maybe by leveraging low-tech bioengineering vernacular knowledge, so by using like local living materials, we create like a high impact at low cost solutions, and they protect also the biodiversity while without relying on massive budgets. So we could also build institutional resilience by replacing very expensive maintenance with community stewardship. That's kind of our idea in the project. And so when we design soft infrastructures that local people can actively build and care for, we're transforming somehow risk management into a collective action of care. Yeah.
Great response. Anyone else have a response they would like to share?
Okay, is it me? Okay, so actually, one of the greatest opportunity lies in recognizing that landscapes are not only ecological systems, but also social, economic, and political systems. So even in developing countries with limited financial and institutional resources, meaningful progress is still possible when young professionals such as us combine expertise with community engagement, policy advocacy, and innovative partnerships. Such instance is when we work with communities rather than for them, because local communities often possess deep knowledge of the land. And next, we can also use remote sensing tools, particularly in my example, a geographic information system, to get other components about the landscapes. It is actually free, and datasets are also accessible, which can improve planning and monitoring. So landscape professionals may not solve climate change alone, but they can design resilient landscape, strengthen the communities, and foster that collective effort with each other.
I like to add to your response. I really like what you just said about landscape being also about people. And I guess for me, in this project that I presented, I had like climatic anxiety, but I also had, like political anxiety. Many of the things I discovered and mapped really made me be sad and very mad. But I think designing landscapes provide a way of imagining. So I think it's important to not stop the imagination just because we have this anxiety. I think this is a way we can show people other scenarios of how, for instance, in my case, how can the border be other thing? How can the river be recovered? To show beauty, to show collaboration, and I would say it is important to understand the role of imagining and providing those imaginaries to people who might not be able or do not have like the skill of putting into images or words those new scenarios.
Those are all amazing answers. I really like that reminder, though, Miriam, that that's part of a landscape architect's role is to be able to imagine something and put it into an image and communicate that. That's a really powerful tool to have. So there's another question that was good. I just have to bring it up again here. So what are the best approaches for young landscape architects to integrate traditional ecological knowledge with modern landscape planning and digital technologies, while ensuring that local communities remain equal partners throughout the planning and implementation process?
Maybe I can answer that. At least during the process that we had for this project, alongside another subjects that were of digital design methods, we could analyze like this scale of the Alps is pretty huge. We had never worked with a scale like that, so it was difficult to approach it with certain technologies like the traditional ones, So by having these tools, we could manage to, in first place, approach the scale, understand by 3D printing, by using models, to understand what was the volume of the debris that came into blood, and what was the difference of height in section, things that in a more traditional way or with other tools would have not been able or would have not given us the clues to approach the project as we did. I think it is also really important, all these also analog tools, like in our project, at least we use a lot hand drawing. And I think that is also a tool that helps us to land all these ideas in a more sensitive way. And it is, I think, the combination of both the new technologies and also the analog, going into site and having these first impression and feelings and following all those combination of experiences can help us to give a better response to a project. So I think the new tools definitely help a lot, but also the analog and the old school technologies help us.
This is also something that we discussed quite a lot with Sam before, and maybe he can explain a bit better afterwards, that there's this general tendency when working on policy that it tries to minimize risk and fit people into fit people and landscape into fixed administrative categories. And this very much goes against our need to diversify our systems and diversify the outcomes of what we try to do. And this is kind of very crucial to making a resilient system and a resilient landscape and a way of living in the face of climate change. And one way to tackle this is to try to recenter some of the traditional cultures of mobility that was very much present everywhere before we were fixed into these administrative boundaries. And this is something that would be interesting to expand on in almost all projects. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Mila, about reducing risk, and we tend to go with the same old. Yeah, and taking risks is a really important way. That's how you get innovation, right?
Yeah.
And changes, and try something. It might not work, but you try it out, right? And envy you in a way because because when you, as a student and when you're first a professional, it's really that opportunity to take those risks, right? And so keep that flame alive, because it's important to continue on through your career.
Yep.
Any
But
other
if I can
thoughts
add
on
to
that?
that,
Go ahead.
yeah, if I can add to that, I think
Yeah.
innovation is not necessarily something that's totally new. I think it can very much stem from historical practices or historical traditions that are very much rooted in the past. And I feel like a lot of these traditions perhaps have been working very well and efficiently, and also deals heavily with communities, like the Swanans that we used as an example for our project. And I feel like because of this policies dealing with risks, especially, perhaps a lot of these traditions are getting lost, and somehow reintroducing and reapplying and somehow using these old traditions as reference points for these new concepts could in a way be another form of innovation, I think.
Very good point.
Great response.
So, Carla, should we go back to your suggestion for the round of questions?
Yeah, sure.
That was a
Just a
good one.
quick round group debates on actions, actually. So was for all of you, for each and one of you, so was the one action from your project you'd put on our action card, something appear anywhere, could start this month, even if it is just small or big, or what could start? What can someone anywhere could start, and that you could put from your project and you can share with them?
I'd be happy to start. I think something that wasn't maybe talked about so much in our project, but was key, is you can start by actually knowing the plants and the local systems just around you. You would be surprised to find out that actually a lot of plants can be very productive and very beneficial in so many ways. We almost ask them to multitask too much now that everyone is trying to find ways to use them for climate action. But it's really amazing. In literally anywhere you would be from, you can discover something from your own hometown, or perhaps even reconnect with something that you were familiar with when you were little. So yeah, that's one way.
Thank you, Mila. Lucas, how about you?
I thought about maybe just take a vacant or underused space and just put some plants there, just have some natural thing there growing, use drought adapted planting and planters, just something that people can see. We can use the space that we have. It doesn't have to be vacant.
Thanks. Meli, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking that something that helped us during our project was the observation, like taking the response of Mila. It is pretty amazing to see that many of the answers are sometimes in front of us, like all these species, all the situation of the rivers, how things work. They are all there, but sometimes we just have to start paying more attention and observing and looking to these clues that give us a response. Maybe it sounds obvious sometimes, but it is not. It is right there. So
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
observing.
Observing, quite powerful, actually. Quite powerful, and sometimes we just disregard it, but it is quite powerful. Miriam, how about you?
I think the I would suggest to be, as Melissa said, like observing, but also be aware of the position that we have in the issues that we are observing. So sometimes the position could be a position of responsibility, let's say. So how are you responsible of the current conditions? But if you're not responsible, how could you, now that you're aware, how could you like try to solve, not solve, but offer an alternative future? So I would say be responsible to the landscape, to the ecology, but also be responsible to the society you're part of. And I think that that could be something interesting to start with today.
Thank you, Miriam. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I mean, for me at least, I want to combine observation and also being mindful of like the ecology that surrounds us. But especially, I want to point out to maybe observing water, because I mean, water is a very important element, not only in landscape, but just in the way we live. And I feel like just having basic observations on how the water is flowing around us and where the water is moving from and where it's moving to would be like a great starting point in kind of getting your feet into this realm in a way. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sam. Varinia, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a key point actually. Looking how the water flows. In our experience, it was absolutely key because the sediment is moved by water, so we could see like this rusty color in the stones where the water was flowing, and that was kind of as the starting point for our project. But I would also add, and this is something that happened to me in the process of researching, is to look at very old maps and drawings, because that gives you like mapping and cataloging local and vernacular techniques of managing the landscape. Like for us, for example, this willow weaving traditional thing, we see how past communities have been collaborating with nature because it's never new. I mean, nothing is really a complete new innovation, let's say. It's been like people's been working with this for several years. So, and it's also quite interesting to see like this really old drawings before the computer was there, because it gives you a lot of knowledge on how people used to document as well their environment and how they manage the landscape.
Great. Ryan, over to you.
So this is actually similar to what Sam said on observing, and Varinia mentioned on researching old maps, which I actually did on my thesis. I found a geological map made in the 80s. So under my topic, I think one action is that maybe search the nearest geopark or even a national park and check what makes it different. If possible, you can also try to visit it. You might be surprised about the information on the geology or other components of the site. In my case, there's only one established geopark in the Philippines, so there is still much to discover. Especially geology is one of the many things that shape our landscapes and different systems complementing each other.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to point out another question for you guys that Miriam actually made a fantastic idea on anxiety and imagination and how can we keep up with this, right? So El Nino is coming or is actually here, and then by November and December is going to be even more stronger than now. And then Europe is actually really hot right now, I think. Colombia is in Latin America is quite hot as well. So I wanted to ask you guys about yes, climate anxiety And yeah, what keeps you delivering instead of despairing? What drives you to just keep going? I love Medium's idea on it's quite hard out there, but through imagination and design, we can just, tap into the idea of keep going. But from each and one of you, yeah, what drives you and keeps you going?
Maybe I'm not exactly answering to the question, but it kind of maybe I connected to also what Miriam was saying earlier, and someone mentioned also about care, is that although it is quite hard for landscape designers or designers in general to feel like they have any form of political weight, it's still quite important. Like dreaming and anxiety kind of has a lot to do with the economic reality of any place. And it's kind of really important that climate action and ecological knowledge is understood as something that is inherently tied to the economic agency. Because the way we talk about traditional knowledge or any form of climate knowledge is often somehow separated from the fact that people would actually be living in those territories and living with that reality. And it's always important to ground that. And I think in observing that, we also try to have space for hope. But hope seems to be something that we very much have to cultivate ourselves within the communities and within the way you regard your own work. And it becomes something very active. It's not like it doesn't start from hope. It's almost like hope is this thing that we maintain. It's almost like a tool. Yeah, that would be my thoughts on this.
Right. Landscape and hope as a tool. I'm gonna keep that. That's fantastic. So Sam, what about you? What keeps you going?
Hmm. Mhm. I think I'll come back if that's fine.
It's all right. No worries. No
Yeah.
pressure. No worries.
I can
Anyone
go.
else?
Yeah, I can
Yes.
go.
Yes,
I
sure.
think to me, what has helped to continue, it's to think about like future generations, because we tend here, at least at GSC, and I imagine in the other schools too, when we think about climate change, it's always within a time frame of perhaps like 100 years. So we for sure know that probably we're not gonna be here when like the most I don't know, like terrible scenarios could happen. But we have, as I said before, like we have the responsibility, even though if it's not our fault, to not like look away of these problems. Now that we know the problems, we have the skills probably to like show people what like what are the risks that we probably will be exposed to. But we also need to like not just know and tell people like, okay, this is going to happen. What we really need to offer a solution for the future. And I think to me, it really helps to think, like to tell to myself, okay, I can't unsee this. And the way of pushing that is just, okay, I'm going to offer something for the future, even though it might not be for us. It's probably going to be for the future generations. So I think thinking about time and thinking about how could design be implemented in different phases allows me to keep going.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Anyone else? Sure, Ryan.
Okay. So, what keeps me going? Perspective. I believe that everything will be better in time, because when we have anxiety and the protests, we usually say this should not be this way. But when we do projects or climate actions, we ask ourselves, what can I build or change or test moving forward? That shift does not eliminate the concern, but it actually gives a direction. So that kind of mindset tests and challenges my curiosity. And I believe that is what keeps me going in landscape architecture and in life as well. What Mila said a while ago, hope, it goes a lot. And what Miriam said as well, for future generations.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Anyone else wanted to? Oh, all right, Lucas. Yes.
Yeah, I might want to just add something because in Europe or in Germany, many people there's a rising group of people not believing in climate change. I think it's a global thing, but I always argument with what if we have greener cities? What if we do the designs that are proposed? What if we have all of the implementation? What's there to lose? Like, there's nothing to lose for more biodiversity, more green spaces, more urban spaces for people to enjoy and live there. And as an architect, you only design for one person or for a family or family groups. But as a landscape architect or urban planner, you design for a whole community, a whole city. And you never know how your design is evolving in the future because new plans will come, some plans will go away. You never know how people will use your space in the end. And I think the idea of change and inevitably the possibility that you can't control everything is very nice about our practice.
Great. Coolness. Anyone else?
I think
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for me, it's because I'm Peruvian, so the El Niño is hitting us very hard from like since pre-Columbian history. And I think one thing that we have not learned yet how to do properly is planning, because this happens it's cyclical. So this happens every, I don't know, 3 to 4 years. And one of the reasons why I chose Switzerland and this scientific school is because of how people plan here. It's crazy how they manage risk and emergencies. It's very well done. It's very well researched, like scientifically. That's why, for example, in Blatten, there was no casualties. Like people all evacuated the town before this happened. And I think that's possible because of how much we're planning and like the information we're gathering when we study these places. And since I'm from a very risky country, which is Peru, that's what's driving me right now to just gather this knowledge here, gather the experience, and then take it back to my country and contribute from there.
Thank you very much, Marina. Meli?
Hey, I think I take back the idea that Miriam mentioned. Our projects take a lot of time to see results. I think landscape is not like an immediate result project. You cannot see the results of your project really soon. They will take 50, 60 years. There will be several processes that may not happen as you plan. But I think we have a lot of responsibility on how our project is going to respond. For instance, there are many projects that are happening along Mexico, like very famous in the Caribbean, being exploited, having all these coral reefs. And there should be studies that show the impact that all of these infrastructures and projects for hotels are going to have in the environment. And though they don't have all of this information and they don't respond to what it should be. So I think the whole responsibility, if we as future landscape architects are already as landscape architects, we can stand out and say, okay, dude, you cannot do this. This will affect this way. And if we have that encouragement of having all this background of information that can provide us the tools to not sponsor these kind of projects, I think our response has to be quite responsible, because it doesn't affect now, it affects for many, many years in the future.
Yeah.
So I think that's...
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Melly, for that response as well. Yeah, I think it happens a little bit similar here in Colombia. We also get hit by the El Niño just quite with cycles. Just this year, in the beginning of the year, we had a massive flooding in the Caribbean savannah, and it just happens almost every 2 years, every 3 years. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, but you know, we don't have that sort of like planning with water. We are actually trying to figure that out with political and governmental laws that are trying to figure it out, planning with water. But as you just put it quite well, Meli, we need more landscape architects to figure this out, and also here in Latin America, I think it's not only important but really necessary, right?
Positive balances with them. Oh, plus I've lost $1,000 a month on my change.
I just want, go ahead.
Well, once I filed my taxes for 2024.
I just want to say you are all so inspiring. So I love the way you all talked about healing the landscape and by inference healing ourselves and integrating traditional knowledge, as well as thinking about the very unsexy things like winter and maintenance that actually make it work, deliver in the future in an ongoing way. So you're very well positioned. And, it's interesting. I heard on the radio the other day about hope being a verb. So I think if we think of it that way, we have hope but make it an active thing, as you were mentioning before. It's very important.
Definitely. So should we just wrap this up?
You're not going to take the money out and you're going to invest it with.
Right. I think someone has.
And that's going to be locked in, which you can't use except for when you retire.
Great. Comments from Christy, by the way, if you've had a moment.
Yes, sure.
And look at them, and Lucy as well. There's great comments there on the comment page. And it's been great. I know we've gone over time, but it's been great to listen to all your perspectives and get your thoughts.
Yes. Thank you, everyone here for participating. Thank you, Miriam, Ryan, Lucas, Melissa, Varinia, Sam, and Mila, also for the rigor of the project and the beauty and the honesty of your ideas and thoughts and perceptions on landscape architecture and climate action. We're very, very, very proud of all the hard work that you've put on this, and then coming today and show today and showcase your ideas and projects. This is quite remarkable. So please connect with them. And also thank you to our directors, Tamsin and Jane, and to the IFLA Climate Action Group, and everyone here keeping building resilient landscapes every day for the future. And Jane, I'll head back to you for a closure.
Again, I just want to thank you all for the time and effort you put into this, because I know it's not a light task. It's a lot of work to do it. So we really appreciate it. And not only do we have the opportunity to have that conversation today, but this session will live on in the recording. People can go back to it and listen to it. So it'll continue to deliver. And look forward to hearing about your careers and your further areas of research in the future. We'll follow you. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.